Noun classification systems are grammatical devices used to categorize nouns into classes on the basis of some shared features. While nouns may be grouped in various ways, such as animate versus inanimate nouns, singular versus plural, or even malleable versus non malleable nouns for that matter, a given classification system counts as a gender system only when its classes manifest beyond the noun itself and onto other sentence elements in the form of agreement markers. This means that the morphological form of these sentence elements is determined by the gender of the controller noun. Consider these two sentences from French below. The nouns hat in 1a and dress in 1b occur in identical semantic environments. Yet the pronoun my and adjective new take on different morphological forms depending upon the gender of the noun. Therefore, we cannot discern the gender system of a given language by simply looking at its nouns. Rather, its existence must be uncovered through agreement. Further, the number of genders in a language, that is, the number of meaningful categories it classifies its nouns into, is not limited and can range anywhere from 2 in Hindi to up to 20 in certain Bantu languages. That said, of the less than half of the world's languages that do utilize grammatical gender, most contain only about 2 or 3 gender categories. As we saw with that example in French, speakers of gendered languages must necessarily know the gender of each noun in order to productively use it in a sentence. And evidently, native speakers of gendered languages have few problems assigning new or even artificial nouns to one gender category or another. Moreover, despite the complexity of a given gender system, children are able to acquire gender early and largely error-free. But how do native speakers learn which nouns belong to which gender? Existing literature suggests that this gender assignment process is informed by two types of noun features, semantic and formal. Primarily semantic assignment systems like the one found in Kannada and Godavari classify nouns according to their meaning. And often, but not always, this meaning is rooted in biological sex. So nouns denoting biological males are classified as masculine, whereas those denoting biological females are classified as feminine. All other nouns are considered neutral. This assignment strategy is fairly intuitive in that given the meaning of a noun, its gender can easily be predicted. That said, most other gender systems are not nearly as straightforward. In languages like French and Russian, for instance, the gender assignment process relies more on formal or morphophonological cues. These types of gender systems still do use semantic cues for classifying sex-differentiable nouns. This includes nouns whose biological sex is apparent or relevant to us, like humans or domestic animals. In fact, there are no known languages with a purely formal gender system. However, for the remaining ungendered nouns, which comprise what is known as a semantic residue, it is not possible to infer an obvious gender from meaning. Nevertheless, their gender is highly predictable from their formal features. In the Eastic Cushitic language Kafar, for instance, the non-sex differentiable nouns whose citation form ends in the accented vowel are feminine, while all others are masculine. Similarly, in French, 99% of all nouns ending in the vowel a, like in pa, are masculine. Thus, as a first approximation, we may say that gender assignment systems are of two types, primarily semantic and primarily formal, keeping in mind that the latter still utilizes semantic cues. It can often be difficult to tease apart the role of semantic and formal features in the gender assignment process, especially since there is considerable overlap in the predictions made by these features. That is, a noun could be classified as feminine because of its semantic, phonological, or morphological properties. The question then arises, which of these features actually informs the native speaker about its gender? This is where loanwords come in handy. These are words borrowed from another language and integrated into the host language's lexicon. As new nouns are borrowed into a language, they must be assigned a grammatical gender. Observing this assignment process, operate on nouns that are not already part of the host's lexicon, help verify the psychological reality of the gender assignment process. It confirms that the abstract assignment rules are indeed a part of the native speaker's competence and not mere chance regularities observed in the host language. In a study where German speakers were asked to assign grammatical gender to English loanwords, it was found that speakers were rarely influenced by the semantic associations between loanwords and their German equivalents. Rather, the morphological shape of the English nouns was the most powerful pressure in the gender assignment process. Another study similarly found that loanwords showed predictive semantic features only for human nouns. Otherwise, they were classified according to morphophonological properties or assigned to the default class. Even so, we cannot simply overlook the influence of semantic features in the gender assignment process, especially in the cases where they make contradicting predictions from their formal counterparts. In fact, in such scenarios, semantic criteria generally tend to override the formal ones. Another way to tease apart the overlapping influence of these predictive features is to look at the acquisition of gender by children. If they acquire their language's gender system asynchronously, that is, some parts develop before others, then this confirms that there are multiple influences at play. Gagliardi, Lids, and Feldman in 2015 looked at the acquisition of says noun classes in children. Their goal was to examine whether children can make use of the predictive phonological and semantic information to classify novel nouns in the says language into its gender categories. They compared the children's performance with that of an optimal Bayesian classifier trained on a corpus of child-directed speech. Here, the Bayesian model is the ideal learner since it relies on the statistically strongest skew to make its predictions. This provides a baseline to measure the children's performance against and assess whether they optimally utilize the distribution of predictive features available in their input. This study found that children relied on phonological features out of proportion with their statistical reliability. That is, they relied on the phonological properties of a noun to predict its gender, even in the presence of more reliable semantic cues. Notably, this statistically suboptimal behavior was not demonstrated by adult says speakers. A possible explanation for this asymmetry is that during the early stages of lexical acquisition, the phonological features of a noun are more apparent and hence easily accessible to children than its meaning or related semantic information. This experiment helped tease apart the competing semantic and phonological pressures at play in the gender assignment process. It also helped shed light on how children draw inferences from their surroundings and the kinds of biases they bring to the task of language acquisition. For my thesis, I attempted to adapt the Gagliardi and Litz experiment to the Hindi language. My objective was to discern how native Hindi speakers utilize semantic and formal cues to classify Hindi nouns into one gender category or another. To do this, I obtained gender classification judgments on borrowed English words from adult Hindi speakers and then compared their performance to that of a logistic regression model trained on a Hindi corpus. This helped illuminate how Hindi speakers make use of the distributional cues available in their surrounding input to assign gender to novel nouns, and whether they behave like optimal statistical learners in this process. What makes the Hindi-English case particularly informative is that gender is essentially a non-functioning grammatical category in modern English, with the exception of a third-person singular pronouns. That is, English does not classify its nouns into meaningful gender categories. Thus, apart from the semantic information about sex-differentiable nouns, English words carry no inherent gender of their own. Yet, the heavily coded mixed nature of modern colloquial Hindi demonstrates that Hindi speakers have no problem assigning grammatical gender to borrowed English nouns. So, if not through cues from the source language, how are Hindi speakers assigning grammatical gender to words borrowed from English? This is what I set out to investigate. Hindi has two grammatical gender categories, masculine and feminine. Sex differentiable nouns, that is, nouns referring to humans and other high order animates like domestic animals, are classified according to their perceived biological sex. All other nouns fall into either of the two categories, masculine or feminine. For instance, kursi, the word for chair, is feminine, whereas gadda, the word for mattress, is masculine. I started by compiling a list of features most likely to be predictive of the gender of a Hindi noun. This list comprised of word endings, which I believe to be a highly predictive phonological feature for grammatical gender in Hindi. For instance, most Hindi nouns ending in the vowel a are masculine, while those ending in the vowel e are feminine. This set of features formed the foundation of my logistic regression model. Next, I trained the model on a database of Hindi nouns extracted from the Hindi-Urdu tree bank corpus. I annotated each noun with its feature values and true gender labels. This essentially rendered each noun into a vector of binary values. The model then adjusted its weights to fit itself to the training data. The resulting weights indicated how predictive each feature was in the gender assignment process. This fitted model then assigned each novel noun in the test data to a gender category. Results from this model acted as the optimal baseline against which I could measure the performance of adult speakers. Preliminary results from the model trained just on word endings demonstrated a 73% accuracy in predicting the gender of Hindi nouns. The training corpus comprised of 5,161 Hindi nouns, the majority of which were masculine. 73% of these nouns were classified into their correct gender category by our model. However, the model misclassified 367 masculine nouns as feminine and 127 feminine nouns as masculine. This seems to suggest that word endings alone are not sufficiently predictive of grammatical gender in Hindi. Other phonological and perhaps even semantic cues are at play. Taking more of these features into account could potentially help improve the performance of this model to better replicate human judgment.